The mother-in-law from hell. My new husband promised his mother would never live with us, but the knock came 3 weeks after our wedding. Helen arrived with suitcases and judgment, her cold eyes scanning our home like a queen inspecting her kingdom for flaws. She criticized my cooking, rearranged my shelves, and smirked when my husband stayed silent, trapped between love and loyalty. Every morning, I woke to her voice muttering behind closed doors, listing my failures as a wife and daughter-in-law. Helen moved family photos, hiding my face behind curtains, placing her own picture at the center of our mantelpiece. Our cat Cleo hissed when Helen entered rooms. Helen said cats know evil, and sometimes I believed her. She cooked dinner her way, tossing out my spices and staring as I ate, waiting for me to admit hers tasted better. At night, strange tapping sounds echoed in the walls. Helen slept soundly, her door locked tight against whatever haunted the hall. My friends stopped visiting, claiming they felt watched by something cold and mean. Helen smiled, calling them jealous gossips. My husband apologized for his mother's moods, but avoided my eyes, retreating to late nights at work more often. Helen began collecting strange trinkets, clay dolls, candle stubs, a bundle of dried thistles she tucked beneath our bed. I found a diary in her suitcase filled with cruel wishes and scratched out curses, each page marked with my name. One morning, our cat vanished, only a tuft of fur left on Helen's pillow and a strange black feather in the hall. Helen offered me tea, eyes glittering with satisfaction. The taste was bitter, and I spit it out when she turned away. My dreams twisted Helen's face looming above, whispering secrets in a language I didn't understand, her smile wide and rotten. The lights flickered whenever she entered a room, shadows trailing behind her like a living cloak, swallowing warmth and comfort. The air grew colder. The smell of burnt sage and vinegar clung to every surface, and my hair fell out in clumps. Helen hummed a lullaby I'd never heard, off-key, until the notes looped in my head long after she fell silent. My husband grew distant, lost in exhaustion, dark circles beneath his eyes. Helen clucked and patted his cheek, whispering, "Mama will fix it." One night, a mirror shattered as Helen walked past, shards spinning to spell "leave" in jagged letters across the floor. I started hearing voices in the vents, murmuring warnings, begging me to escape before it was too late. The houseplants wilted no matter how I cared for them, their leaves curling as Helen watered them with a cruel smile. Helen replaced my wedding ring with an old, tarnished band, insisting it was a family heirloom. It pinched my finger until it bled. A neighbor dropped off a pie, whispering, "Good luck," before glancing nervously at our dark windows and hurrying away. At midnight, Helen stood in the yard, arms raised, chanting at the moon while the wind howled through the trees. I found her in the basement, drawing strange symbols in salt, each one shaped like a heart pierced by a nail. Our dog whimpered, refusing to enter any room Helen was in. His fur stood on end until she left the house. Helen laughed at my worry, claiming, "It's just family traditions, dear. Don't be so dramatic." The walls grew damp, black mold spreading in corners despite bleach and scrubbing. Helen only smiled, watching as I worked. Photos of my parents curled and blackened on the edges. Helen claimed it was humidity, but her eyes glinted with satisfaction. My skin itched where Helen brushed past, cold fingers lingering like frostbite, leaving welts I couldn't explain to any doctor. A jar of honey on the windowsill filled with dead flies overnight. Helen said it was a sign of blessings to come. My husband started talking in his sleep, muttering Helen's name, repeating, "Forgive me," as sweat drenched his sheets. Helen hosted a dinner for her friends, serving food I'd never seen before. The guests left early, crossing themselves as they hurried out. I heard scratching from under our bed. Helen left a bowl of milk, whispering, "For our special guest who lives below." The lights in the hallway flickered, forming silhouettes that danced and writhed until Helen snapped her fingers and everything went still. One morning, I woke to find my hair braided tightly, impossibly so, while Helen hummed in the kitchen, eyes on me. I tried to call my mother, but the phone only has static and Helen stood behind me, silent and smiling. A letter arrived with no return address. Warning, she cannot be cast out, she must be repaid in kind. The silverware bent into strange shapes after Helen set the table, forks twisting into spirals, knives dulling as if worn by centuries of use. Helen's shadow grew longer at dusk, sometimes splitting into two as candlelight flickered, both watching me with hungry intent. My reflection lagged behind in every mirror, mouth silently screaming while Helen's reflection moved in perfect unison. A stain appeared on the ceiling above my bed, shaped like a handprint, growing darker every night I slept in the room. Helen started wearing black veils and old pearls, muttering to herself, tonight, the debt will be paid." I found a bundle of black candles and pins hidden in Helen's closet, wax still dripping as if they'd been burned recently. At dinner, Helen recited a prayer in a guttural voice, eyes rolled back, every light in the house snuffed out in an instant. I hid in the bathroom, trembling, as whispers seeped through the pipes, urging me to fight back, to end it now. Helen left a note on my pillow. "You belong to me until the end of days, unless you dare to break the chain." I finally confronted Helen, demanding she leave, but her smile widened and her voice turned cold. "You invited me, remember?" That night, I dreamed of fire, Helen standing in the flames, untouched, laughing as I screamed and begged for mercy. My husband vanished after an argument with Helen, his phone left behind, his clothes folded neatly on his pillow. I searched the house in desperation, hearing Helen's laughter echo from the attic, her footsteps never far behind mine. The attic door was locked, but a cold draft spilled from beneath, carrying the scent of earth and old, forgotten things. I found my husband's watch, half buried in a pile of salt by the attic window, the time forever stuck at midnight. Helen greeted me up the stairs, hands clasped, her voice honey-sweet. "He's gonna make amends, you'll see him soon." I wept, but Helen only sang, her voice growing stronger as the house grew colder and the shadows pressed closer. Thunder shook the walls, windows rattling as a storm raged outside, lightning illuminating Helen's silhouette in every flash. Helen demanded I kneel and beg for forgiveness. When I refused, the lights burst overhead, glass raining down around us. The house filled with the scent of burning sage and something fouler. Helen danced barefoot, leaving bloody footprints on the kitchen floor. My husband's voice came from the walls, pleading for help, but Helen laughed and said, "He's learning his lesson at last." I ran for the front door, but it melted into the wall, replaced by endless wallpaper patterned with writhing, weeping faces. Helen cornered me in the living room, eyes black as coal, mouth stretching into an impossible grin as she whispered, "Your turn." A wind rose inside the house, ripping photos from the walls, tossing furniture as Helen chanted louder, voice echoing in every room. The floor buckled, revealing a pit beneath, filled with writhing shadows. Helen tried to push me in, but I grabbed her arm. Her skin burned icy cold, hissing and sizzling beneath my grip. Helen shrieked, writhing as I refused to let go. Memories flooded my mind, every cruelty, every insult, every loss Helen had caused, boiling into rage and resolve. I dragged Helen toward the pit, chanting words I didn't know, but felt rising from deep inside my bones. Helen clawed at me, shrieking, "You can't. You're nothing without me." But my strength grew with every step I forced her closer. The shadows in the pit reached for her, whispering her name, begging for their release from her curse. Helen's veil tore free, revealing her face, a mass of writhing worms and hollow sockets, nothing human left. I flung her into the pit, her screams swallowed by darkness as the shadows surged upward, devouring every trace of her presence. The house trembled, floorboards snapping, windows shattering as a new silence fell, a peace I'd never felt since Helen arrived. The pit sealed, the floor smoothing over as if it had never been disturbed. The air grew warm, sunlight streaming through clean windows. My husband reappeared, dazed but alive, stepping out of the attic. The weight of Helen's curse finally lifted. Photos straightened themselves, my parents some smiles returning, Cleo the cat darting from the basement, purring as if nothing had happened. The plants bloomed, green and vibrant. The walls were clean, and laughter returned to our home for the first time in years. Neighbors visited with flowers, whispering thanks, saying the darkness over the house had finally lifted. My husband embraced me, promising we would never let darkness take root in our lives again. Still, at night, I sometimes hear Helen's voice in my dreams, promising she will return if we ever forget what she did. But I light a candle, clutch my wedding ring, and remember the strength it took to break her hold. The house remains peaceful, filled with light and laughter, the memory of Helen fading into nothing but a warning. We keep a salt line at every door and window, never speaking her name, never forgetting how close we came to losing everything. And in the quiet of midnight, as the wind stirs, I whisper to the shadows, never again, never again.